Hello and welcome to today's session where we'll be looking at data formatting. In the previous session, we looked at data entry and we covered some foundational blocks for data entry in Microsoft Excel. If you haven't checked that, I would recommend that you quickly watch the video and get abreast with what we covered in the previous session. So in today's session, we'll be looking at data formatting, which is essentially to format your data beyond the raw points, that you entered it prior to this time. And looking at what we have entered, from what we've typed out, and I guess you've typed out from your on your application as well, you can see certain things. Let's start with the serial number column, right, which we call the SNO column. And looking at it, does it look okay to you? What are your observations about it? I'll go first. For me, I think the SNO text and then the numbers, um, they don't seem to be in alignment, right? They don't seem to be in alignment. The SNO seems to be more to the left, and then the numbers just seem to be to the right. And I would like to have both of them to be aligned together, to the left. And luckily, Excel has such alignment features, right? So in the home tab, we have this alignment menu section, the alignment section here, where it allows us to align tabs. And you recall what we had covered, where we said if you hover your cursor over any object or area or a model, Excel tries to give you a brief explanation or description of what is expected of that module, feature, or even a function. And in this case here, we're looking at the alignment section, all right? So we're seeing that by default, we already had this bit here keyed in, right? So what does this say when we look at it? It says bottom align, align text to the bottom. We'll move to the left. We have middle align is centered within the top and the bottom of the cell. Looking at this now, looking at the content, because we're looking at the cell here, it seems okay. All right. If I was to play with this and to hit this, I don't seem to notice any movement. Okay. And we're going to see why that is the case. It's because if I should zoom in, I can see that the height of the cell is not is significantly okay, such that selecting this doesn't show much movement. But you see, when I selected top alignment, there was little movement. All right, little movement, but it's not so visible, especially when your view point is set to normal of at 100%. Okay, now this now that's because these areas has to do with aligning the content of the cell with regards to top, bottom, right? The top, bottom, or to align it, excuse me, to align it to the middle. However, with the problem I cited with this column here, I was talking about aligning it to the left, to the right, and we also have the center option. So we have here to the left, we have center to the right. So here by default, it's already on the left. Now, if I should hit center, I see that the SNO has moved to a central point. If I should hit to the right, it has now moved to the right, which is in tandem with all the numbers. Okay. Now, looking at this, is this how I want it to be? Is this how you want it to be? It's up to you. Play around with it. Whatever you settle for, that's fine. At this point, that's fine. Now, let's move to the next column, the name column. Remember, we made entries, with the full names, and we said this. The entry here is Bellemagren, Bomagren, David John. Now, before I move on, I'd like to just quickly point out something here. This long rectangular bar is known as the formula bar. Okay, when we go into formulas and functions, you would understand a bit more about the formula bar. Essentially, the formula bar shows you the formula of a cell, the formula contained in a cell. That's because sometimes what is displayed in a cell may be as a result of a different manipulation, in case of Excel, a formula or a function. But more on that when we get to the formula and functions bit of the course. Okay. Now, why I'm drawing attention to the formula bar is you can see that when I select cell B2, what's visible here, I'm seeing Belema G, and there seems to be another character that is not visible. But from the formula bar, I can see the complete entry. Now, when you send this document out, whoever you're sending it to may not be able to go skim through the formula bar all the time. And imagine you have a lot of entries. It will mean that the person has to click on each cell to see the content of the formula bar. One of the things you can do is to increase the width of your column, Okay. So you see, while I move my cursor up, you know, the cursor the cursor icon changes its appearance. While it's this way, it changes its appearance. In this appearance here, I can select the column. If I'm taking it to a row, I can select the row. However, if you just move it between the lines, you see, the appearance of the cursor is now different. For a row, it has like a cross, but the vertical points the arrows have pointy ends, right? This is to indicate that you can increase the height of the row. You can increase or decrease the height of the row. Now, the same rule applies to a column, right? Where you move it. But for the column, what you're doing is that you're manipulating the width of the column. So you can increase or reduce the width of the column. In this case here, for the name, I can increase it by clicking down on it, and then I drag. So I'm dragging to my right to increase it. I can drag a bit more to still increase it, or I can drag to my left to reduce it. So I'm moving it this way, and then you have for the serial numbers, which is our SNO column, you can also drag to adjust the width of your column. Another key thing I would like to just quickly chip in terms of adjusting the width of your column, is that you can drag, or you can make the column width to automatically adjust to the cell that has the most content in it. What am I trying to say? Now let's look at the next column, which contains our course. We have different courses. We have Lex Excel together, we have the driving course, and the width. Now, because when you have more entries, you can't always drag, especially when you have entries that span the normal default area, so you're scrolling down. It's best where you allow the application to adjust the width based on the cell with most content in it. Now, one of the quickest ways of achieving this is to still simulate that action where you move your cursor like you want to adjust, like to drag, but instead of dragging, now to drag, you're clicking down, you're holding down that left click and you're moving it to the direction you want. But instead of holding down the left click, as your cursor has changed this appearance to what is on my screen currently, what you should do is double click. So you double click and you see automatically the width of the cell, of the column rather, has adjusted. In this case, Let's Excel together is what has the most content in it. All right, so it has adjusted to fit Let's Excel together, or every other column just fits, so everything is visible in this column at this point. Okay, now still on formatting, to give these data more look and feel, we have duration of 1 hour, 3 hours, and the likes. Perhaps there's no need of having hour here. Part of formatting is to make your data set, really, really more understandable in a presentable manner. Okay, you could, if we're expressing, and it's good for uniformity purposes, if we're expressing our content, what the data we're storing in a particular form, it should be consistent. So in this case, perhaps the duration, you can just specify the duration to be in hours. So anyone who is going to be privy to this document is going to see that, oh, the duration is in hours. So 1 represents 1 hour, 3 represents 3 hours, as the case may be. Now, moving on to the cost. So the cost here, we know that the cost has to do with money. And most currency are expressed to 2 decimals. Okay, and they also have like a separator like 1,000 separators. So if I was to make another entry here, and I'm going to say Bina Bina Jonas, and the course the person is going to be learning is teaching, and I'm going to say 2 hours, and the cost I'm going to say 1,500 or 1,500, and the country of choice I'm going to select Germany. Okay, I'm going to select Germany. Now, you recall from the previous section how I was able to display just Bina in column G. Okay, I'm just going to quickly type out 16 to follow through. But we can see that this is 1,500 or 1,500. It's not easy to express for this to really show like what's the content contained herein. Now, remember from our number section where we looked at this drop down, we said we have different formats, all right, different formats. So if it's a currency, which is what we're dealing with, or accounting, you can select currency. So it shows the default currency that you're running with, depending on your choice of country. Okay, so if your country's currency is not um, contained herein, you can quickly add that, by selecting this, and then under symbols here, you know, you just scroll through to look for your own country, and apply the country and apply your country's currency. It may take longer time, I'm from Nigeria, and I seem to see the naira symbol. It's expressed in different dialects, or different ethnic tribes in Nigeria. I'm just going to select one. They all mean same thing, right? And so I can see that now this is applied to this first cell here. Okay, it's applied to this first cell here. Now, if you recall from data entry, we looked at the copy function, the cut function, the paste function, but we didn't look at one here, which is the format painter. And you remember the example where I was trying to make you imagine a painter, an artist that has drawn up something and wants to paint on the canvas, so they apply stuff. You can see with this here, you have something that looks more like a paintbrush. Now, what the format painter does, if you can read the description, it helps you to apply the formatting from one area, from a selection, to another area. So here I can simply just apply the formatting that I've applied here on this cell E2 to cell E3 by simply clicking on the format painter here, and then I click on the area where I want it to be applied to. And you see, same formatting applies here. Now, but when I click on it once, that formatting rule has gone off. If I want it to stick so I can apply it to different areas, what I would do is I would double click on it, and there I can click on this, it applies here, click on this, it applies here. I can even select an area and it applies all the same. Okay, I'm going to escape this. Also, when we're applying different formatting rules, I can select, like I've highlighted here, go to my drop down and then select, the currency that I want, and I just simply change it, you know, to my preferred country currency. So I'm just going to go with the Nigerian Naira symbol here, and just a second, I'm scrolling down, and I'm just going to click on this, and I have it all so that I'll be. So my Nigerian audience would relate more with this because this is a Nigerian symbol. But regardless of where you're watching this from, all you need to do is select your currency, and your currency should be displayed herein. Okay. Now, having done this, another thing I'm looking at this, to make this stand out, another thing I would like to apply is the SNO, the name, the course, all these are headers, right? And so you would agree with me that the headers, like your tables, should be distinct from the actual content. of the cells below. So one of the things, one of the ways you can make your headers distinct is to make it bold. You could italicize it, you could underline it, you could color it. And luckily, all of this is available to us under the font option here, this font section here. So I'm going to just highlight all of them, by click holding down on my left, and then I'm just going to highlight all of them here, and then I say bold. You can see instantly they're all bolded, right? If I'm not content with that, I can still apply colors. Now we have different forms of coloration. We have to color your font, and then to fill the cell that your the fill the cell. Now let's use these two entries here, Bellemagren and Bomagren. Now I'm going to fill it, the drop down, and select this color blue. You can see that the entire content of the cell, the entire cell is filled. Now for this here, I'm going to click on this drop down because this is for font color, and I'm going to change it to green. You see a difference here while I zoom in is that for Bellemagren, which is cell B2, the cell, like the background of the cell color, is changed. But you may not notice it. The font color is still the same. For Bomagren, I did not change the cell color. I didn't fill it up. What I did was I altered the font color. I'll just change the font color to something that would really be obvious, that would pop, something like this. So you see that the font color, changing the font color and filling up the cell with a different color are two distinct things that you should take note of. Okay, I'm going to restore the zoom size to normal and just undo those actions of changing the colors of those cells, okay, and focus on the headers. All right, so now I'm just going to change the headers. Now what I do, I want to fill the headers. I want to give them a different color to make it pop. So now the content is not so visible. That's because of the color I set it to. I fill the cell colors. But to make it visible, I can easily just change the font colors to white. You see, now it's visible, it's more visible, right? Another thing, to still take it a notch higher rather, I'm going to increase the size, the font size. Okay. Now recall what we said. You can increase the size by incremental steps. Clicking on this, you see that here is incrementing. Okay, it's incrementing here. Now, I was only doing that to cell A1. Reason, I want to show you something about this cell alignment, which I was trying to point out to you that it wasn't so visible when we're making changes. Here you can see that it's aligned to the bottom. Now, because the font size is not commensurate with the cell size, if I should choose the alignment of middle alignment, you see now it's visible. The change is visible, that the cell is aligned to the middle. If I should take it to the top, you can see the difference. Okay, I'm just going to set it back to the bottom, all right, so that you could just appreciate that bit. Now I'm going to see for this cell A1, what's this font size we have here? 28. I'm going to select all these other cells and set here, because here I can drop down or I can type it. So I'm seeing 28 here. I'm just going to click on 28. Again, having set that to 28, you can see that the content of these headers are not so visible across board anymore. Again, I'm going to use the automatic adjustment of the width of the column like we've just learned by double clicking, right? And it's now visible. Another thing I would like to also show, even though Excel by default gives us this grid layout so we can see the lines drawn across, it is still important to have lines, for you to draw out lines for your content to be visible. Remember, the spreadsheet application is to store and also organize your data. All right. So have your data have a more organized look. There's a feature on the font section that we have also not touched on, and that's this one regarding borders. Okay, apply borders to selected areas. Now, typically, I like to apply borders to a broad area. So I'm just going to highlight all the entire data set except this first name here. And instead of just clicking on this default one, remember what we said, wherever we see an arrow, like a point down, it means that there are more options that are visible to the user. So I'm going to click on that. And then I have different options for the borders. The borders are typically lines, okay? And I'm going to select all borders. You can play around with this, okay? And I select all borders. And you can see that now our data set has more structure to it. Now on this serial number area, I personally, for my own personal preference, I prefer to just align it to the center, and it is this way. So you can see that it has, a different look to it. Play around with this, okay, and let me hear your thoughts, regarding this. As one other thing I would also like you to attempt on your own as a take-home assignment, is replicate this with a different data set, but more importantly, instead of applying all of these borders, I want you to create a table. Okay, create a table. Yes, it's in a tabular format, but Excel also has a table feature, which I would want you to work on and share your observations, where you ran into challenges, and let me see it in the comment section while I also flip mine. Okay, now I'm quickly going to just undo all of this while you create your table. We're going to take off all the fill, set the font to black, and set my font type to 11. Okay, so now to create a table, there are different ways of creating a table. Okay, you can use the insert tab. Some persons use the insert tab, and that's fantastic. So, however, having that your data set is already prepared for you, you click on the insert tab here, like I'm doing in my case, and you see different options. We're just going to go to table. Okay, now putting my cursor over it, we can see that there is also a keyboard shortcut to say Control T, and it converts this data set to a table. A table has vast advantages, so many advantages, we can't even cover them all. But one of the things I know about table, as I've come to use it, it helps with organizing your data better. It helps with applying certain formatting. Now observe that we have how many tabs here. We have home, insert, page layout, formulas, data, review, view. If you don't have developer on your screen, that's fine. You have help. But when I click on table or I use the Control T keyboard shortcut, it gives me this wizard. We call this a wizard or a dialog box. Excel, is basically asking you to confirm where is the data for the table. Now you recall how we've been talking about cell referencing from our earlier section on data entry. If you've not looked at that, please take a look at that. Here you can see things come at play. Now just ignore the dollars, those dollar symbols there, and you see things like A, ignore the dollar symbol. So if you ignore the dollar symbol, you're seeing A1. All right. So if I should just take off the dollar symbol, you see one. You don't see anything else here. I'm going to take off the dollar symbol. Okay. And you're seeing A1 colon F17. Now, from the top of your head, you can already tell what A1 is. A1 is this point here, right? Now, F17, that's what, remember, column F, row number 17. So they're basically saying A1 and F17. Now, that's cell referencing, A1, F17. Where you see a colon in between cell reference is to indicate a range. So a range here now is a selection of cells. So we're talking about from cell A1 to F17, which is the data range, the data set for this table that we want to create. Okay, and then you also have by default this checkbox here to say my table has headers. If you do not select this, Excel just creates default headers, and gives it according to columns, that are in that range that are specified. So recall, for your ranges, all right, a cell reference, a colon, the end of the cell reference, indicates the range. Okay, I'm just going to hit escape here and then use the keyboard shortcut Control T. You see the same dialog box. Now, when I click on OK or enter, you see now we have another tab, table design, added to this. All right, so under table design, let's just move to this section first that has table styles. Here you can select different styles by default that Microsoft Excel has already has in store for you. You can select these, you can select this, so it makes it easier. You can you can now move to this first bit here in terms of properties, to rename your table if you so wish to rename your table. Okay, so we can just call this our first table. However, when you're naming your table, if you're renaming your table, there's some important conventions regarding table names. It's that you can't have a space. So depending on your data set, perhaps you're trying to do names of persons in a course, you can't put a space the way it sounds. So you would use different naming conventions. One of such is camel case. So camel case is where instead of the space, you bring the words together, but everything is, the name, the n is in uppercase. The next word, it's now in uppercase. Name of student. So now student S will be in uppercase, right? And then it progresses down. If you're done, you just hit enter on your keyboard or you click out of the area and your table, will be renamed. And the important thing, or one of the several advantages of tables is that you can easily reference call this table, the way you would call a cell reference. You can easily call this table as a cell reference, as you go ahead with other functionalities. So please play around with this, try to see how you can generate more data sets, format it, without a table, format it as a table. And I'll see you in the next section where we're going to be talking about formulas and functions in Excel. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, share to those you're very certain that this would be really beneficial to. Thanks, and see you next. Bye for now.